Hi everybody, it's Whitney from All the Shelves. Today I'm going to be continuing my series on American literature. I'm going to be talking about books from 1930 to 1935. I decided to divide the 30s up again into two different sections like I did with the 20s because the 30s is the time period that I study in school, and so I have so much to say about the time period and the books in it, and there are so many books I love from this time period. It's just like this really tumultuous time in American history, so I am going to take a little bit longer to talk about it. Last week I had a chance to read As I Lay Dying for the first time with Kate Howe and Stephanie from That's What She Read. We did like a buddy read, and it was one of the best experiences I have ever had reading a book with somebody. It was just like way more informal than class, but I still feel like I got way more out of it than I would in a seminar discussion, sort of led in that typical Socratic way. Nobody was trying to impress themselves the way that people do in grad school, so I feel like there were just really honest responses and sometimes emotional responses to the writing, which was very helpful, I thought. So that was As I Lay Dying. It's the story of a very dysfunctional family whose mother is dying, and they have to deal with her death. So it's told from the perspectives of all the different family members, and some of them are more coherent than others, and they are all sort of dealing with their mother's death and dealing with their relationships to each other. I'm not going to get so far into As I Lay Dying because I feel like it deserves a whole video of its own, a more in-depth discussion about the things that Kate and Stephanie and I talked about. So I will lay that aside for now, but that was published in 1930, and then in 1932 Faulkner published my favorite of his novels, and that is Light in August. This book is incredible. I cannot recommend it enough to people, and I feel like it is one that sometimes goes under the radar. These two that are actually packaged together in this book, The Sound and the Fury and As I Lay Dying, are the two that people usually read when they read Faulkner, and then I guess if there's a third one that they read, they'll read Light in August. But I actually think it's a great starting point for him because the narrative itself is really accessible. It's about this girl who is traveling, kind of hitchhiking her way across the state and in the South, and she is very, very much pregnant and she is looking for her baby daddy, basically. And when she arrives in this town where she believes that the father of her child is, she also encounters this man named Joe Christmas, and so the book is kind of divided primarily between their two narratives, Lena and Joe Christmas's. And so you have a lot of interesting stuff happening with gender, and then Joe Christmas is sort of vaguely perhaps black. It's never quite clear what his race is, but you know, other people believe him to be black, and so essentially he is black, which is a fascinating look at race. Faulkner continues in the vein of a lot of the literary obsessions of the teens and 20s when he kind of uses modernist techniques. So he's very interested in identity becoming fractured and in how people with these fractured, sort of inconsistent and irreconcilable differences and identities can't really find their place in a community, and how a community that has all these irreconcilable problems in it cannot find its place in a larger nation. So obviously, writing about the South in the 1930s, he's going to be very interested in gender and race. There's a line that I love from this novel that says, "Memory believes before knowing remembers," which is a very confusing, kind of loopy way of thinking about time. You believe in your memory before you know that your memories are true. And it's about this way that we can restructure the past to serve the needs of the future. He also talks about how characters have a foreknowledge of something now irrevocable. So to believe in something that's going to be in the future means that it is inevitably going to happen. So as with all Faulkner, there are loopy concepts of time that are actually really reminiscent of the kind of psychology that people were thinking about in the 1930s. And so that leads me to the next book, which is Civilization and Its Discontents by Sigmund Freud. Now, I know that the videos are called American Literature, and I'm doing a series on American literature, so there won't be a whole lot of nonfiction, but this one is so short, and it really synthesizes a lot of Freud's ideas into one very focused little package that I found very helpful. I think that Freud for a long time has gotten a bad rap. Whether you studied him in literature classes or psychology classes, people tend to think of Freud as this kind of like sex-obsessed old drug addict, right? There's all this talk about how much cocaine he did, and that's how he must have come up with this idea about penis envy and castration anxiety and the Oedipal complex, like who wants to sleep with their mother? Nobody. That's not what this book really is. I think that this book takes those ideas that we know about Freud and puts them into the context of thinking about civilization and what makes us happy and unhappy about living in a civilized world, or living in communal societies. And I think that his ideas are very logical and rational and believable and still really pertinent. So he's talking here about how people are instinctually quite aggressive. They have this sort of aggressive undertones and they want to act those aggressions out, whether that's through violence or through sex. And so we form civilizations to curb those violent tendencies, and because we are instinctual, these sorts of civilizations and these restrictions are going to make us unhappy, but it's kind of a trade-off because we need to be near people in order to have sex with them and show our dominance over them, right? So a lot of the modernist texts of the period were thinking about Freud. Freud was enormously popular. Not only this look at civilizations, but also his stuff about totems and taboos and his stuff about dreams and his sexuality stuff. It was just really highly circulated at the time, and it helped explain and guide some of the modernists' concern about isolation and how we interact with each other. And the next book that I want to talk about is also very interested in Freudian ideas, and that is The Postman Always Rings Twice by James M. Cain. So The Postman Always Rings Twice is about a man who comes upon a highway stop in California. It's this diner, and there's this woman who lives there that he is immediately infatuated with. Problem is, she lives there with her husband, so as they are kind of going about their dirty business, the two of them hatch this plan to kind of take care of the husband so that they can lead this beautiful life together. Well, it's full of double crossings and just pulp disgustingness. These characters are all terrible to each other. It is just noir at its essence core. Everybody is rotten. Everybody is out for himself. And I think that this book is very interested in Freud because it really resists this idea of an unconscious, because with evil, rotten people like this, it means that actions aren't just happening. An unconscious would imply that there's some sort of evil motivations underneath it all, evil self-serving motivations. And the characters in this are always trying to come up with excuses for why they're terrible to each other, and those excuses never concern just their evil natures, which we as the reader can kind of tap into because of the way that literature helps us uncover someone's unconscious. And the last two books I want to talk about get even more pulpy, and those are Gladiator by Philip Wiley and The Man of Bronze, the first Doc Savage novel by Kenneth Robeson. Both of these books are always categorized as pulp fiction, but I actually think Philip Wiley was trying to aim for a little more. Maybe he fails. I would say that he fails. It comes across very much as pulp. But you can definitely see some of the big ideas that he's wrestling with in the novel. So Gladiator is about this scientist who is experimenting with super strength, and he attempts to inject this serum into a kitten, and it grows up and it is just this monstrous kitten that attacks a cow and takes it down, like grabs onto the cow's neck and kills this cow. So it's obviously like kind of dangerous, probably very unethical. And so of course he decides to try this on his unborn son. He injects his wife with a serum without her knowing it. Like, he drugs her and injects it into her stomach, and she births this super strong little baby. His wife couldn't know about it because she's extremely religious and she thinks that her husband is playing God, and she doesn't like that he's like messing with biology. And so this little boy is born into this family with a father who sees him as a science experiment and a mother who sees him as a sinful abomination. And you can see how that's going to cause some kind of internal internal strife in this child. So the whole book he's trying to really figure out what it means to be this superhuman, what his responsibilities are to the world, and how he's going to either hide or perform his super abilities. This was, as you can tell, a precursor to Superman. The Superman comic was published first in 1938, although there is some speculation and disagreement about when Siegel and Schuster first came up with the idea, but for sure people accuse them of stealing this idea from Philip Wiley. Just because it's about a superhuman does not mean that they stole the idea. I think the stories are different enough that you can't call it that. And there were definitely stories about superhumans before Philip Wiley's Gladiator, but this book is really fun. And it helped me think about superheroes today, which are so prevalent that I would say that even if you are not writing a dissertation about early American superheroes, you might really find this one interesting. And if not interesting, then just good fun. The other one is The Man of Bronze. This is Doc Savage. This one feels a lot more like Batman because Doc Savage is a self-made man. Every morning he does a series of exercises for his brain and his body that turn him into this superhuman. And he and a gang of his super smart and strong friends go out into the world to solve international problems. In this first book, they go down to Central America, South America. I don't think that they are specific about that. If they are, it doesn't really matter because I really doubt that Kenneth Robeson knew anything about the place that he went. Anyway, they go down there and there is this evil capitalist taking advantage of this secret community of Mayan-like natives to the land who have been there all along, kind of like an Atlantis type thing, and they have all of this gold and advanced technology, and all these outsiders are trying to infiltrate this society, steal their gold, and basically enslave the people. And Doc Savage, because he is an extremely moral, upstanding citizen, is going to go maybe have sex with a few of the beautiful Mayans and save their community. Both of these are a great example of Pulp Fiction from the 1930s. Pulp Fiction in the 30s is just really fun. It's often interested in violence, in masculinity, and in secret identities and superpowers. So I've read a lot of it because it's kind of paved the way for the superhero stories that I study. So that is my take on American literature from the first half of the 1930s. Again, today's video was on 1930 to 1935, and next week's video will be on 1935, 36 or so to the end of the decade, 1939. I hope you guys are liking these videos. I'm having a really good time reviewing all these kind of canonical or at least representative works from these time periods, and if you read any, let me know. I'd love to talk to you about it further, and I will see you in my next video.